There you see now how all your so-called power counts for absolutely nothing. How your entire empire of destruction comes crashing down, all because of one little cherry. One little. What a lovely ballet. It seems so full of form and color.
Hi, I'm up. It is, Marty's right here. His tail might get in the way of the camera. It is June. I have no idea what day it is. It's June 22nd. My hair looks crazy. It is a rainy, dreary day outside, so I'm having to find some creative places to film today because I have quite a bit to film and no light to film it in. There's Martin. A few days ago, I started There, which is my TBR Tackle book for June. If you don't know what TBR Tackle is, it is a super fun booktube game created by Kieran at KD Books. In this game, we picked 12 books at the start of the year, and each month he gets a different content creator to make a prompt for us, and following those prompts, we choose a book to read in that month. So in January, February, March, April, May, and June, we have picked books to read, and now we are down to just 6 books left on our TBR Tackle list. I vlog all my TBR Tackle books, and at the end of each vlog, I pick the next book for the next month. So at the end of this vlog, I will be picking my book for July. In June, our content creator was not a friend of Kieran's, but a very strange prompt, and it could have gone one of many ways, but I was able to phone a friend, and my friend chose There by Tommy Orange as my book for June. Tommy Orange is a American Indigenous author, and that went really well with my previous book that I read for TBR Tackle, which again, you can see that vlog linked below, who was also an Indigenous author. It's been interesting reading two American Indigenous authors back to back and seeing similarities and differences in their writing style and in the stories that they're telling. I started this book Monday night. It is now Wednesday morning. I decided to pick up this book on audio. Yesterday at my office job, I was able to read quite a bit more, and now I'm about 65% of the way through the book. So I only have about the last third of the book to read. I had intended to do a check-in before then, but here we are. There follows quite a few Native American people who all live in Oakland, California. And the very first chapter of this book is kind of a brief history of the atrocities and genocide that America has visited upon Native Americans of all different kinds of tribes and indigenous people of the Americas. It kind of sets you up for the idea of, one, the history of Native Americans and how they have been systematically and specifically targeted for genocide in the Americas, how they've been scattered, how they've been abused, how they've been villainized, specifically around addiction to drugs and alcohol, and specifically around like gang involvement. It's called a prologue. So after that, you start getting into meeting the characters, and we meet the characters one chapter at a time. Each chapter is then written in their voice. So the first chapter is Tony Loneman, the second chapter is Dean Oxendine, etc., etc. As we meet these people, we see that they are all Native Americans who have grown up in Oakland, California, and who have been either raised there or born there or lived there most of their lives, and their relationship to their Native American roots, to their tribal roots, and also their relationship to Oakland, the city that raised them. It definitely focuses on Indian Native American identity and how each person feels about their Native identity and what they think about that, how they connect with it, or how they're not connecting with it. Oakland is kind of like a running character throughout the stories as well, because some people feel very strongly about them being from Oakland, some people feel very connected to that, and some people it's just incidentally where they live, but it definitely has impact on their lives and what's going on. So far I'm really liking it. It's definitely a very modern book. There's definitely a lot of references to like Target and cell phones and public transportation and all that kind of stuff. Normal, everyday things that you would find in 2018 when this was written, so like very current in a lot of ways, although obviously pre-pandemic. The connection with their heritage is very much through that modern lens, whereas I think I was reading The Only Good Indians, and since in The Only Good Indians they all grew up on a reservation, they were all much more connected to their heritage in a way, much more connected to the tribal traditions and ceremonies and everything, whereas in these people are all in some ways disconnected, although they are trying to connect, and some of them are more connected than others. Aside from Oakland, aside from all these individual characters being Native American, the common thread and theme and plot that is happening in this book is that they are all connected in some way to this big powwow that is happening in a huge stadium in Oakland. So in some way or another, they're either on the powwow committee, they're either a speaker there, they're going there to dance traditional dances, they're just going there to connect with their roots in some way. They're all headed towards this place. They're all headed towards this stadium. One of the characters works at the stadium, and they're all headed towards this powwow. And we see how each person is involved in what is going to culminate in the plot. So one person happens to work there, but is involved with a gang. One person is going there to do documentary on Native American people's lives in Oakland. One person is a speaker there. One person works in the stadium. And so they're all coming together. Some of the chapters are a little bit backwards in time, some of them are a little bit current, some of them are like somewhere in between. And so I'm at the point now, 65% in, where all the characters are headed to this place, this central location. All the characters are pretty set as far as like what they're going to be doing once they get to the powwow. There's only been a few scenes where one of the characters in one chapter noticed another character in another chapter, and now we're seeing kind of the reverse of that. Marty's talking to the birds. He's not going to do it now. I will say that reading it on audio, it's a little bit confusing as to whose voice I'm in. Luckily on the audiobook, there are different people reading for each character, but some of the male character voices sound very similar to me, so it is hard for me, like, even though they'll say the name in the beginning of the chapter, I get a little confused with, like, who they actually are and what their actual storyline is. Hey, stop it, don't scratch that. I just can't connect the name to the character story arc and the voice to the story arc necessarily. So what I want to do before I move on and listen to the rest of the audiobook, because I do think I want to finish this on audio, not physically, is go through and just skim each chapter physically so that I can get a better idea for which character is which on the audio and which character arc is which named character, if that makes sense. Overall, I'm super enjoying the story, and I think it's interesting that this book has a very specific cadence and speaking style to the characters, very similarly to The Only Good Indians. Now, The Only Good Indians was entirely written in that style, and it was very conversational, and it was very regional, and it was very almost like dialect or accent. I do think this has an accent throughout it, but because people have had different experiences in this book, their accent is individual to them, whereas The Only Good Indians had like an overarching accent to the writing. I think the like in-between writing of what's happening, the action, is written in a much more plain way, and then each character's voice has a very distinctive accent. And then I just want to say that the accent in There is very different than the accent in The Only Good Indians. They're very, very dissimilar. but the common theme of there being a regional accent is interesting in both, because although you do find that in other books, I feel like it's been more prominent in these books written by Native Americans. I'm going to do that little bit of skimming, and then I'm going to try and finish this book in the next few days. That will mean that I have quite a bit of time before the next prompt is announced. So let me know if you've read There by Tommy Orange. After reading this and The Only Good Indians, I definitely want to read a lot more works by Indigenous authors. Reading both these books have really made me think that I want to read modern work by American Indigenous authors. So I have a bunch of Louise Erdrich that I want to get to. I do have a Leslie Marmon Silko. The book that I have by her was written in the 50s. I would love to know some more modern Native American authors that you would recommend. So definitely, if you have any that you can suggest, put them in the comments below. And when I figure out the characters and read some more of There, I will check in. Days ago, and I really loved this book. I thought it was so great. I thought the writing was really strong, and I thought that the characters came through really well. Like I said, I do think some of the characters kind of blurred together in my mind, especially the young male characters, but I think that had more to do with listening to it on audio. I had a really good experience reading it on audio for the most part. I definitely cried at the end of this book. There's a lot of violence towards the end of this book. Definite trigger warnings for gun violence. There's a little bit of animal violence. So just to be warned that that is there. There's also talk of rape and sexual assault. There's also talk of specifically targeting Native and other brown women for violence. I do think that all those things were woven into the story really well, were really part of who the characters were, so it made sense, and it felt very realistic to me. These characters felt very realistic to me on a lot of levels, and what they would be thinking about and what they would be discussing and what they would be doing. You know, be careful, because if you live in the US, we have, and other places too, but especially in the US, we have lots of gun violence right now. There is no gun control, and people keep getting murdered by mass shootings. This has a mass shooting in it, so just be careful if that's something that you are particularly sensitive to right now. I hope it is something that bothers you, but I hope that you are doing okay. I do believe this is Tommy Orange's debut novel, and there were a couple of things that seemed maybe related to it being a debut. There was a lot of the use of he said, she said. You need to find some synonyms, or you need to find a different way of stating that, he replied, or he stated, or something like that. So that did get a little frustrating at parts. And the thing that was frustrating about it, I think, is that it takes you out of the story. So you're just hearing that repetitive usage all the time, and then it kind of blinks you out of your suspending your disbelief and being able to really be immersed in the story. I do think that that wouldn't have been such a problem for me if I had read this book physically, because that way your eyes can just glance over it, or you can just incorporate it into your mind without having to read it. Whereas when you hear it on audio, it's repeated over and over and over again. I really like the themes of displacement in this book and how displacement can be placement. There was a lot of talk about Oakland being a place where no one is ever from. But when you're from there, how does that make you feel? How can you connect with a place that you aren't from, but you are from and you grew up there and it is your place? Or how can you connect with a place that someone says no one is from there and it's supposed to be this wasteland of identity, but it is your identity? So that was very interesting, and I think it tied in extremely well and easily with the idea of Native identity and Native heritage and Native culture, and how Native Americans and Indigenous peoples have been displaced all over, and specifically and systemically and purposefully, and how can you reconnect with your heritage if people are telling you that you don't deserve to do that, or that you shouldn't do that because that's not the place that you were really from. It was really interesting to me to see the juxtaposition of these characters who, although they're of Indigenous descent and of Indigenous culture, they live in a totally separate place where, although there are Native American people living there, they're scattered around and they're not concentrated into one area, and how probably that happens everywhere. With The Only Good Indians, which was much more about people living on the reservation and how those people are all grouped together. How escaping the reservation was a theme in The Only Good Indians, whereas returning to their native culture was a theme in They're There. So it's interesting that when you are a displaced culture and when you are a displaced population, none of the places are perfect. You want to escape the res because of the horrible conditions there and the stigma attached to it and things like that, but you also want to be able to revel in your culture and your heritage and your community. So it was interesting, the idea of the community and how that works. Really, really enjoyed this book. Can't wait to read more by Tommy Orange. Definitely will be rereading this book. I think reading it on audio was perfect for this month and for TBR Tackle, but I also think I definitely missed some things that I would like to go back and read physically one day. I have to find a better synonym for interesting. I think it's interesting that two of my favorite books that I've read so far this year, I think, are written by Indigenous American authors. Something to keep in mind. It is a few days before the end of the month, and I will be back to watch Karen's video so that I can see what my July TBR Tackle book is. It is July 1st, and I saw that yesterday Katie put up his video, so let's go to that and see what our next TBR Tackle pick will be. I am not really awake yet. I slept late today, and my work schedule got changed, so I just want to film this real quick before I have to leave for work. Oh, this is a long prompt, 10 minutes. So Angela said that she hasn't even given us the prompt yet, but she's already messing with our stack. So she said that if the initials of the authors on your list are on the periodic table, they can stay on your list. But if they are not, then you have to swap them out for a sci-fi related book. So it doesn't have to be hard sci-fi or soft sci-fi. It can be very, very soft sci-fi. NL is Noblium. Interesting. JO is Joliotium, which is a proposed name for dubnium, discontinued elemental symbols. So this is like in the middle somewhere. SN is tin, that stays on. There is no YC. Oh no, I've been trying to get this book and I've been trying to keep it on my TBR Tackle list the entire year so far, but there is no KL and there's no YG either. So what we are left with is Boot in the Attic coming off, Ghost Bride coming off, Long Division coming off, Transcendent Kingdom coming off. Now, Transcendent Kingdom does have a science element, so does that make it science fiction? I guess it does make it science fiction. So this one I might end up putting back on, but we'll see. And then the only two books left from my original stack are, oh, yikes, Nella Larson's Quicksand and Sigrid Nunez, What Are You Going Through? We've divided it into two stacks. We've divided it into those that are on the periodic table and those that aren't. So let's see what the next part of the prompt is. This is the problem with doing it like as you watch it, because it's hard to know what's going to happen in TBR Tackle, because TBR Tackle gets totally wild. She said that once you've switched those out, then you can move on to doing the actual prompt, which has something to do with the letters in your name. I'm going to keep Transcending Kingdom because it does have a science element. I'm going to switch in Riot Baby. I'm going to switch in The Institutionist by Colson Whitehead. I need 6. Let's put on Never Let Me Go. So now my list is Never Let Me Go, The Institutionalists, Riot Baby, super excited about that one, Transcending Kingdom, What Are You Going Through, and Quicksand by Nella Larson. That is my new stack. Okay, now let's watch the rest of the prompt. All right, she said, look up your initials if they're on the periodic table. It's not MS that is molybdenum, molybdenum. It is MO, which I think totally should still count. That's my name. And it's periodic table number 42. What? What? That is bananas. That's bananas. So she said take the molecular weight, round up. So the molecular weight rounded up of MO is 96, and she said that is the minimum number of pages, so your book has to be over 95 pages in my case. Then you get to pick any book. She also said if you're going to read a sci-fi on your TBR Tackle that you don't have to do that. But I think I should read Riot Baby, because she also mentioned Goliath by Tochi Onibuchi. So I think I should definitely read Riot Baby for my TBR Tackle for July. How fun was that? That was a fun prompt. And I found out that my name is 42 on the periodic table. Amazing. So these are the books we're left with. In this video we read There. It was amazing. And now in July we're going to read Riot Baby. So exciting. Let me know if you've read any of the books on my stack and what you think of them. Let me know if you read There. I would love to discuss this one. And let me know what your thoughts on Riot Baby are in the comments below. If you haven't started your own TBR Tackle, just grab 6 books and do the prompt with Angela, or grab 5 books and start when you see the August prompt. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!